Welcome to the Flying Octopus Podcast, offering a new perspective on Red Wings hockey, as well as all the important news from around the NHL. And now, here are your hosts, Tony Wolak, Devin Little, and Evan Sabrin.
So when the Red Wings announced they had a kids club, we signed up our 2-year-old for it just to, get him some Red Wings gear and why not? He'll have fun with it. The stuff actually came in the mail this past week, and honestly, I'm really impressed. They gave him a nice swag bag. He's got a little backpack. He's got a lanyard for being a member of the kids club. There was a Alex DeBrincat stuffed cat in there. I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, I was surprised. Like normally, like we get him like the cool things, and then he wants to play with something just simple instead. But he actually took to it. I was like, awesome, this is great. It just he's got his Red Wings gear. He's a fan now. Honestly, I think him and Archie would be bros if they ever met up. But yeah, I've never done anything like this. I never signed up for a fan club thing myself or anything like that. But really impressed with how the kids club turned out. Have you guys ever signed up for anything like that?
No, but I'm curious if it's like, does he have to deal with Capital fans in the area where you live? Like, is there like smack talk between? At what age do kids start smack talking if you show up to school with a Red Wings jersey?
Not at 2, but him and one of his best friends actually does the "Let's go Caps" chant that his dad figured out how to get him to repeat. So maybe there would be some rivalry there, but I don't know. It's cool that he likes it. Our dog stole the stuffed animal. Surprise, surprise. But yeah, he loves it.
Yeah, I'm still getting my daughter to try to get into Red Wings hockey. And we have like this ongoing joke because every time I come home and I want to watch a Red Wings game, I'll say, "Oh, hey, we're going to watch some hockey tonight." And she says, "Absolutely not." And she's 5 years old. She wants to watch Bluey or, one of these other crazy kid movies. Zootopia is another one that's been on our doc lately. But she, about a couple of years ago, and I think I told you guys this once, she met Dylan Larkin and she got to take some pictures with him. So she loves Dylan Larkin. So if she doesn't want to watch hockey, I'll just say, "Daddy's going to go watch Dylan Larkin." And then she'll come and sit on my lap and watch hockey. So cute stuff, right? And with that, I welcome you to episode 22 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone where you can find us. Check us out on YouTube at the Flying Octopod. You can find us on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Threads under the same name. And don't forget to listen on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Guys, what's going on with the Red Wings is something I don't think any of us saw coming. When Todd McLellan took over this team, the Red Wings were 13-17-4. They are now 15-4-1 under Todd McLellan, and they've enjoyed 2 7-game winning streaks. They also swept their first West Coast road trip for the first time since 1996. So again, did anyone see this coming? Because I sure as heck didn't.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Evan. I certainly didn't see this. They just put a period on their second 7-game win streak under Todd McLellan. Like that's. What are we talking about here? What do you mean they've had 2 7-game winning streaks since December? That's crazy. I mentioned it over on X earlier this week, but it's insane just how different the vibe is compared to where it was back in December. I mean, even just how we talk on the show, right? Like we were kind of groaning that we had to find different ways of saying that the team was not in a good place and it wasn't fun hockey to watch. And now I almost feel like we're running out of ways to say that the team's a lot of fun to watch and this is great hockey. We're getting a lot of extremes this season, but the extreme that we're witnessing right now is a heck of a lot more fun than the extreme we were dealing with earlier in the season. That's for sure.
It's just
and the 4-game win streak out west. I mean, look, I would have been happy with 5 points out of that trip, but to sweep the Oilers, the Flames, the Canucks, the Kraken, that's fantastic. I mean, like, if you think about like where the team was heading into that road trip, they were outside the wild card. They were 2 points behind, or 3 points out of the wild card actually, and had a team in front of them as well. And so, fast forward to today, and hey, they're in a wild card spot. And what's
top wild card spot?
top wild card spot. What's also great about that is the timing was kind of perfect too, because the teams that they've been competing with have actually been doing really well in addition to the Red Wings. So like, sure, if they got 5 points out of the trip, it would have been good. It would have been a solid takeaway, but they would have stayed exactly where they were going into it. Because Ottawa, they got 6 points in 4 games. Buffalo on a 3-game winning streak in that same span. Islanders got 6 points in 4 games. The Lightning 5 points in 3 games, and then the Bruins and Rangers both had 4 points in that same time frame. So like, sure, if the Red Wings, lost a game or two in there, that would have been the wrong time to do that. But they didn't. They won, and they, kind of showed teams around the league and fans and media that this team's for real.
It does. And Devin, you can chime in after me here because you know more about it. But in no shape or way or form did I ever see Elmer Soderblom coming in and playing like this, let alone Albert Johansson and Marco Kasper. Just the performance, like Soderblom is a completely different player than what we saw when he first came up with the Red Wings. His physicality, digging up loose pucks, he's been a force to reckon with. And I did not see that coming. I mean, when you think back to the start of the season, Soderblom was kind of the prospect that people kind of forgot about, and Albert Johansson seemed like to be in Lalonde's doghouse by not getting the playing time. But now he's out there kicking butt, playing 18 minutes a night. So it's kind of crazy. Just even starting 3 rookies in a lineup is not ideal in the NHL, but these guys have performed. And you can see the gelling coming together, and it's fascinating for me to watch. And Devin's, you've watched these guys for years in Grand Rapids. I mean, did you honestly expect them to come in and play like this?
Optimistically, you hope so, right? I think my biggest shock of what we're seeing right now is Todd McLellan's a veteran coach. Has had a long career, a very successful career. And when you think of veteran coaches, you typically think of them as favoring veterans. They don't usually, you don't bring in a veteran guy to develop your young talent. You usually go for someone else. You hire a Jeff Blash or you hire a Derek Lalonde. But I dare say that the young talent that the Red Wings have has progressed the most it has. Pretty much since this rebuild has started under Todd McLellan than it did under the previous 2 coaches. And that's just off of opportunity. That's Todd McLellan believing in these guys, giving them the opportunity to impress and to be who they were drafted to be. And they're responding to that faith by doing what you're saying, Evan. Johansson surprised me with how aggressive he's played. I've never doubted his ability to play the position and play it well, play it smartly, and kind of have some underrated 2-way ability. But the aggressiveness he's showing in the NHL this season is, I mean, you love to see it. He's really fun to watch right now, but definitely was expecting him to maybe be a bit reserved in year one. Just, you're not trying to make a mistake, and you're trying to solidify your positioning and standing in the NHL, and usually don't do that by taking risks. But he's pinching in deep, he's attacking. I'm a big Albert Johansson fan, and I'm an even bigger one now since he's made the NHL. And like you mentioned, also Soderblom, he's doing the things that a guy with his build needs to do. He's playing aggressive. He's mucking it up in the corners. He's kind of like a bull in a china shop. When you're 6'8" and a big mountain of a person, that's how you want to play. And it's really nice to see him get rewarded time and time again. He's on a 5-game point streak. I figured he would look good. He has looked really good in Grand Rapids this year. But the production hasn't always been there in Grand Rapids. So the fact that the production has been there in Detroit, he's got to feel really good about himself right now. And all the people out there right now saying he shouldn't play another game in Grand Rapids, if he's going to play like this, I don't know how you can disagree. He belongs with the Red Wings right now. Overall, I'm really impressed with how the kids are playing. They're really embracing the challenge of playing in the NHL. And they're also doing it under a coach that doesn't fit the typical mold of a coach that is good for young players. They're right now, it honestly feels like the Red Wings are having their cake and eating it too, because there's a lot of things going on that shouldn't be going on with the ingredients that they have. But man, the cake tastes real good right now.
Let's talk about the lineup for a second, because you're right. They are riding a heater, and in theory, at some point, things are going to have to cool down just due to the nature of the game. But
No, I don't want it to.
I mean, if they wrote out the season like this, that'll be great. It's fantastic. But I think it is worth looking at the lineup and kind of evaluating the different, I guess, segments of the lineup. And one thing I wanted to do is kind of just a quick exercise with you guys about how confident you are in this team. So we're going to divide up the team into a few groups: the top 6 forwards, the bottom 6 forwards, the top 4D, the depth defensemen beyond them, and goalies. And we're going to kind of outline, obviously who the players are in those groups, and then share just on a confidence level 1 to 5 how confident we are in them. 1 being not confident at all, 5 obviously being very confident, and just why that's the case. So I'll start with the top 6. So we have obviously the Kasper, Larkin, and Raymond line, and then DeBrincat, Kopp, and I'd probably Patrick Kane once he's fully up to speed. I know Tarasenko's been playing there lately. I'm going to include in this the next man up or next men up for the different positions too, because you do have to factor that in, because injuries are going to happen, things are going to happen. So it's not just about those 6 players, but the depth as well. So the next man up for center, if Larkin or Kopp goes down, will either be Comfer or even Kasper sliding over to the middle. And then next man up on the wing is Tarasenko, since he's been doing that with Patrick Kane out. So Evan, I'll start with you. How confident are you in this group for the rest of the season, and why do you feel that way?
Well, I've kind of lost a little confidence in Tarasenko. I don't think he was what we thought he would be here, and he's kind of declined over the last few years. He's definitely never going to be that 40-goal scorer that he was back in the day with St. Louis. But confidence level right now with the top 6, I don't know, man. I don't know how I turned optimistic, because I used to be all doom and gloom, man. But I'm feeling like a 4, maybe a late 3.9 or something like that. It's been fun to watch, man, and I really like to see the chemistry develop with Kasper's a player, man. And I saw Devin, you tweeted out something yesterday about redrafting that the 2022 draft with Marco Kasper, and when you first off, it was not a great draft by any means in the top 10, but he in a redraft league, he might be a top 3 or 4 pick. And there was a lot of argument going back and forth on social media about that. But I think he mixes so well in that top role, in that top forward role with Larkin and DeBrincat. And DeBrincat has been just absolutely awesome this year. I mean, I did not expect that as much. I mean, he wasn't that bad last year, but he seemed to have found another gear this year, and he's been great to watch.
I don't disagree. I think that DeBrincat's probably been a really happy surprise this season, and not. I agree. He wasn't bad last season. He actually had for you take his stat line. I think most players in this league would take his stat line from last season. But he does look. There's an added level of comfort there for him, and you can kind of see he's really found his chemistry with Larkin and Raymond when they play together. I mean, we saw that last season, and it's just carried over into this season. Seems like he has maybe rediscovered the chemistry he had with Patrick Kane. It was kind of up and down last season. You'd see it, then it would go away, then you'd see it again, and it seems like they kind of have that going again. Yeah, I think DeBrincat's been a really happy surprise this season. But to talk about the top 6 as a whole, I do think I agree with pretty much everything that's been said. Honestly, I think that there's a clear need at the 2C second line center position. I don't think if the playoffs started tomorrow and Andrew Kopp's your second line center, I don't know that you're feeling too great about it. But I don't know that it's a need that you need to bend over backwards to address, because like you mentioned, Tony, Kasper can slide over there. You drafted him to be a center. I don't think you need to go out and go acquire somebody that might block that from eventually happening. And then if Casper's not the guy, you have Nate Danielson in the system, who you also drafted to be a center, and you probably even projects as like a really, really good second line center. So there's a need, but you also have your internal need marinating in both Detroit and Grand Rapids, and that need could be addressed as soon as next season. So I don't know that it makes sense to, again, bend over backwards to address it. And then the wings, I think, are honestly pretty solid. I agree. I think Kasper's looked really good on that first line with Larkin and Raymond. He does a lot of things that those two need from their third line mate. And he's really kind of flashing the talent that made him a top 10 pick, and has kind of sparked that conversation about where he'd go in a redraft. And I guess that then leaves next man up. Tarasenko's your next man up. And again, I agree with you, Evan. I think he's been pretty disappointing this season. I think that he's on a 2-year deal, and I think that he's somebody that already looking forward to next season, but going into next season, you maybe you kind of realign your expectations for him. And then based on that, you feel better about him. Because, going into the season, you maybe hoped he was going to be a 30-goal scorer and really be a steady source of secondary scoring. It just hasn't been. So, maybe going into the next season, you kind of are more comfortable with him because you realize what he isn't anymore. But I guess what I'm saying there is maybe you look for an improvement on your next man up. You can improve on Kopp, you can improve on Tarasenko. I guess it just kind of comes down to what that improvement is, what that looks like, and what the cost to do so is. Because again, I don't know that they're in a position where they need to bend over backwards to address these things.
For the top six, I'm gonna give it a 3. I'm just right in the middle, to be honest. The first line, obviously, they are gelling right now. Kasper, Larkin, and Raymond, those three together, they have just dominated possession, dominated scoring chances. They just work together. They all want to have the puck at all times, and it works. It doesn't matter who they're thrown out against. That is a quality top line. Second line is where I, would go from a 4 down to a 3 in terms of confidence. DeBrincat has been outstanding, but I'm kind of on the same page as Devin with Kopp and with Kane and Tarasenko, for that matter. There's risk there, and running into the playoffs with that group, it could turn out really well, could turn out poorly with not a lot of production. If the team's buoyed by their power play, sure, we'll take the goals, but there is risk there. But I'm not sure the Red Wings are in a position to make a major move to address that group right now. I always find that the trade deadline, the prices are higher just because every team's trying to gear up for the playoffs, and then in the offseason, it's just different because teams are just wanting to get rid of players for whatever reason to open up cap space. There's free agents. That's a better time to make a move, in my opinion. But I would say a 3, but still, that's not bad. It's not that I don't have confidence in them. It's just that I think they're fine. And then next up is the bottom 6. So the players in that group, we have Jonathan Berggren, JT Compher, Vladimir Tarasenko, Elmer Soderblom, Michael Rasmussen, and Christian Fischer. The next man up at center would be Joe Veleno in this instance, but I do see him in the lineup more often than not. On the wing, you can slot in Veleno if you want, but also Tyler Mott. Also, Dominic Schein has been pretty solid for the Red Wings in his recent stint with them. And then Carter Mazur is probably knocking on the door sooner rather than later here. So with that group, Evan, we'll go back to you first again. How confident are you in the bottom 6 being able to be, sufficient bottom 6 for the Red Wings as they chase a playoff spot?
I mean, is the sample size big enough with Soderblom? To me, I think it can be. This team is they're getting the production out of that third line and the physicality. With even Rasmussen started to play a little more physical game. But yeah, I mean, I feel better right now about the third line than I do about the second line. At least it's more entertaining to watch from a fan perspective, because these guys are fun. These guys have been great. Soderblom. I can't see a world where he gets sent back down to Grand Rapids. Michael Rasmussen has always been that kind of player where he's hit or miss. Like you never know what you're going to get with Rasmussen. The Forrest Gump guy, but I'm at probably about a 3 with the bottom six, with the third line there. I'm impressed. I didn't think I would be, as I said earlier, especially with the Soderblom getting all this playing time. And yeah, I mean, I've liked what I've seen so far.
I kind of go back and forth on where I'm at with the bottom six, but I also think that I definitely agree with you, Evan. I like the third line more than I like the second line. I think that when you kind of go piece by piece, look at every single player that plays in the bottom six, there's a little bit of everything, right? Like there's some physicality there. There's some defensively savvy forwards. There's some playmaking ability. There's some guys that have been able to score. There's some guys that can play in all sorts of different situations. Like I said, there's a little bit of everything. I'm probably more confident in the bottom six than I am almost any, when we're looking at this in groups, this is probably the group I'm most confident in, just because of the diversity and just the number of different ways they can kind of configure it. Thinking about a playoff matchup, you tend to kind of tinker with your lineup to match up against your opponent well enough over the course of a 7-game series. And I see this bottom six as having enough different combinations and skill sets that you could make a lineup that works really well against this team, and you can make a lineup that works really well against that team. So I don't want to put a number on it, but I do like their mix. If the Red Wings are thinking about adding at the trade deadline, I really don't know that bottom six is where they need to focus their efforts, because I think you could probably make the argument that they have more bottom six forwards than they know what to do with. Honestly, they probably could stand to sell one off, but when they're on a playoff chase, they don't need to be doing that.
I think what we're seeing here is, at least when it comes to the bottom six, well, let me take that back. For every line except for the second line, and for Kopp and Kane, really, you are seeing players slotted into the roles that they're meant for. Top line, for sure. Alex DeBrincat on the second line, yep. Third line and fourth line, the players they're slotted into the right spots for their skill set and the right roles. And that's what you want to see for a playoff team. Like in the past, the Red Wings have been over-slotting players. They've been putting players too high in the lineup for their skill set and asking them to do too much. And it hasn't worked out. But now there's enough depth where you can place someone like Michael Rasmussen on the fourth line, or put Elmer Soderblom on the fourth line or third line and just let him ease into things. And look how well that's turned out. Even if Joe Veleno's is sitting out some games, hey, that means the Red Wings have good depth if that's the case. So yeah, I agree. For what this group is expected to do, I'm very confident in them. Probably a 4 in my opinion.
Ansar Khan tweeted out on Thursday that Kane's still going to be, it looks like he's going to be on the third line for this weekend's games as he practiced with Rasmussen and Soderblom. How do you feel about that kind of line combination?
I mean, it's worked, so no objections there. I know the scoring hasn't been as high as it's been, and maybe not the Seattle game, but the games before that. But if it's working, it's working. I think that's what we've seen from McLellan. If he likes how something looks, he'll keep it that way. That's why it took a few games for Albert Johansson to get into the lineup, is because, well, Justin Hull and Eric Gustafsson, they were working. So, but once obviously Johansson got in the lineup, he's been outstanding.
Yeah, that's not a very speedy line, is what I'll say.
Yeah. I would even say that, I agree. It's very much if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of thing. But also, very much feels to me like you're wasting Patrick Kane at that point. And he does need to kind of get back up to speed, and he's not playing at the level he wanted to play at right now. But I don't know that playing with those two guys is how you're going to get him there. Because Kane's at his best when he has somebody to pass to, and I don't know that I'm passing to either of those guys. They just aren't those types of players. But again, I'm not gonna question the results. So
All right, so next up we have the top four defensemen. Names you should obviously all be familiar with: Ben Sherratt and Moritz Seider, and then Simon Edvinsson and Albert Johansson. How confident are you guys in this group with how they're currently situated? I know Jeff Petrie has normally been in the top four, but he's out until probably April. So with these four defensemen, what's your confidence level?
I'll tell you this, like I'm not like counting down the days, the Petrie coming back. I definitely think there is reason to believe that the improved defensive play has something to do with him being out. You guys have known me over the years. I've never been a Jeff Petrie fan. I always think back to the movie Moneyball when Brad Pitt is talking to the David Justice character in the movie and says, you know, you're paying me such and such million to play ball for you. But at the same time, you have teams paying Jeff Petrie's salary to not play for them either. So I always think about that scene. My confidence level is a lot better with especially with the second pairing with Edvinsson and Johansson than it is with Petrie slotted in there. Again, we can only blow so much smoke up about Johansson, but again, man, it's like I can't. If I asked either of you right now, who would you rather slot in there, and it's going to be Johansson over Petrie. Petrie takes a lot of heat, but I also think that it's deserved. And I don't think, Pittsburgh gave up on him. Montreal gave up on him. Pittsburgh gave up on him real quickly. And that's why I never understood that move. And I know we've beaten that horse to death. But I really like that. I really like the top four right now. Maybe not as much as with Sherratt, but Sherratt has his moments. I'm going like a 2.9.
2.29. Okay.
Devin, what do you got?
I think we're more or less aligned on this. I think this is the most confident I've been in the Red Wings top four in since this decade began. I think, like at the very least. But also I think that there's definitely room for improvement. I still it's looked better. I still don't like a top pairing of Ben Sherratt and Moritz Seider. I think that in a perfect world, you find another left-handed defenseman to fill that spot, or I guess fill Edvinsson's spot on the second pairing, so that way Edvinsson can slide up there. But whatever. And then the second pairing, I agree. I think you've been making an argument. It's actually Detroit's best pairing right now, with Edvinsson and Johansson. But there is kind of the unspoken thing right now. They're both very inexperienced. This is both of their first full NHL season. Edvinsson obviously has a little bit more experience than Johansson, but not much. And as great as they have looked, it's not typically wise to just kind of trust that the rookies are going to be able to do this for the rest of the year. I think that there is an opportunity for the Red Wings to address the top four. I think that's if I'm making the call right now at the trade deadline, what the Red Wings need to address, it's the top four. Add another defenseman that just can stabilize things and ease the load on Seider and Edvinsson and Johansson, who are again in their first full NHL seasons. But all that being said, I am still the most confident I've been in the top four in a long time. So it has been worse, but it could also be better.
I'm in agreement there. One thing I should have said off the top, and Evan, I think you touched on this, but who's the next man up if one of those four goes down? Is it Erik Gustafsson? Is it Petrie when he's back? That is where I kind of run into concern.
Don't forget about William Lagesson.
We'll get to him. But, I mean, look, Sherratt and Sider, Sherratt's been better this time around with Sider. He still makes some pretty loud gaffes on the ice, but it's been fine. Team's been winning. Edmondson and Johansson have been great, as you guys have mentioned, but if one thing happens to any of these four, there's going to be it's going to be a big concern. So for that reason, I would probably rate this like a 2.5. Like I am concerned, but it's not about the four players. It's about what happens if one of those four needs to miss time, which is a valid concern because injuries do happen. Now, as for the bottom pair and the next man up there, it's Gustafson and Justin Hall, with William Lagesson as the next man up, and then William Wallinder behind him, since he was recalled but didn't play. And throw in Jeff Petrie there as well. Once he's back in the lineup, we'll see where he goes. I'll go first with this one. I guess it's just a 3 for me. Like it's almost like a non-factor almost. Because like if you look at how the Red Wings have deployed their defense in the last few games, I guess during the road trip, there have been long stretches where Gustafson and Hall haven't played. It's just been rotating the top two pairs and closing out games like that. Sure, Gustafson gets something, power play time, maybe a little bit of time in overtime, just due to his skating ability. But if we're only asking Gustafson and Hall to play, I don't know, 8 minutes of even strength hockey a night, and then Gustafson on the power play, Hall on the penalty kill, I can live with that. I would like to see the Red Wings bring in someone just for depth purposes, just another warm body, if you will. So that way, if something does happen, they can slot in that player over a William Lagesson. But don't expect them to, or don't really want them to give up major assets to do so. Evan, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, and I did forget to commend you, Tony, on being the trade whisperer, because as soon as we recorded that podcast with Kuzmenko and Marcus Pettersson, they were gone by the time I edited the piece. Marcus Pettersson signed with Vancouver this week and got 5.5 a year, and I was actually kind of looking forward to seeing if that was something that could have been worked out with Pittsburgh. But
Dev and I were throwing around last week, so
yeah, I kind of want to see the Red Wings make a depth move, like you said here when the deadline comes up. I think, as you guys have said, if Evansson or Sider or even Johansson go down, like they're going to be in a little bit of trouble, especially if it's Sider or Evansson. We saw what happened to the Red Wings when Evansson got hurt for those few games, and it wasn't pretty. So I'm not really sure where they go or who they trade for in that depth defenseman role. I'd like to hear your guys' ideas, because I was always fixated on the Marcus Pettersson, but the bottom pairing is not pretty, and Toronto Maple Leafs fans love telling you about Justin Hall. And we told you so, but no, I'm curious what you think, Devin.
I don't know. I think that there's a reason why the defenders that are in this group are in that group. I think, Tony, you put it really well. The reason why they've looked good right now is because we're just not seeing them a whole lot. And I think that as long as they're able to kind of continue deploying their defensemen the way they are, I agree. The bottom pairing can kind of be a non-factor. You just kind of need some guys that can be stable for 8 minutes of even strength hockey, and then your situational special teams. Like you said, Tony, I can live with that. And I think that especially once they get Petrie back, they'll have some options there to where, they have some different pairings they can kind of play around with. I think that kind of what we're getting at here is the big issue is not if they lose Justin Hall for a long period of time, or Eric Gustafson, or even Lagesson, or, they can plug those holes. It is in the top four, where if one of those guys goes down for an extended period of time, oh boy, we're going to see some pain for a little bit. And that's why I think the top four is where they need to focus their efforts. I think that for the sake of cost, a depth guy, maybe a sneaky guy that maybe is underrated would be ideal because maybe that guy's not going to cost as much as a big swing. But um, I don't know. I think that their third pairing is fine. Their third pairing group is fine right now, just because they aren't asked to do a whole lot. I don't know that you need to go out and get a guy that you're going to ask to not do a lot. I think what they need to do is go out and get a guy that they can ask to do a lot.
I mean, I could go either way. I think if you're going to add a top 4 defenseman, you probably wait until the offseason to do so.
Mm-hmm.
One of the players that I don't think he's the top choice, but one player that came to mind was Alec Martinez. Chicago's going to be out. He has a history with McClellan and Yanni, and sure, put him on the third pairing as a stabilizing player. Could do worse, could certainly do better, but I'm sure the asking price isn't very high.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's probably the route I go if there's Devin, you and I talked about this a bit last week. The Red Wings have a ton of prospects, and not everyone's going to make it. So if there's one player who's kind of, falling out of favor in the organization, like across Hannes, for example, maybe he's not the player you move for Alec Martinez, but maybe he is someone that's considered as trade bait to acquire a depth defenseman. But it's, as far as I'm concerned, just keep playing Gustafsson and Hall low minutes, and it's fine. So that brings us to the goalies. Alex Lyon, Cam Talbot, they've been pretty solid lately. Just especially the game against Vancouver, I thought was, I don't know. I thought that game stood out more than anything, just because the Red Wings did not have their A game. They did not have their legs. And yet Alex Lyon kept him in it the entire game. You can argue the second goal against was a little soft, but he played outstanding. For me, my confidence level is a solid 4. It's not a 5. It would be a 5 if they had a true Igor Shesterkin type, but they don't, and it's fine. But at least with Talbot and Lyon, you can go back and forth. You don't have to rely on one person to carry the load. And Alex Lyon's stolen games in the playoffs before. I am a little worried about Cam Talbot come playoff time, but because of how he performed last year with the Kings. But then again, he probably won't be facing Connor McDavid in the first round, so could be better. So I'll say a solid 4 for the goalies.
I'm loving what I'm seeing out of the goalies, and I did not predict that Talbot would be this solid in net. Especially when you consider coming over from LA, and they were a much better defensive team. But as the Red Wings defense has progressed, and he's looked pretty well. He's 2.83 goals against average, 907 save percentage. It's one of those situations where I think back to last year. It's man, I wish we had this tandem last year when they were going down the stretch, and the goalies were just underperforming. And I think Talbot's a solid option. Let's not forget he made the All-Star team last year. But 37 years old, and let's call it what it is. They're stopgaps until Sebastian Cossa is ready. That's nothing more, nothing less. And I'm in a world where I'm ready to see Cossa, and then probably next year, where he starts getting some time up there. And I think he's ready. I think he's proven it in Grand Rapids now. This is his second year. I don't know. It's probably time. We talked about it before, and when you were ripping my boy Jimmy Howard, Tony. But again, I'm very excited to see a young stud Red Wings goalie who was drafted and developed by the organization, because we really haven't had a stud. I mean, yeah, Jimmy Howard made some All-Star teams, but I'll give you your props. Jimmy Howard was not an excellent goalie by any means whatsoever. I just loved his name and named my dog after him, so that's why I'm always a fanboy in him. But yeah, the goalie system this year, and that was a big concern heading into this season. If these two could, if Lyon and Talbot could, 1A play well down the stretch, and so far I've liked everything I've seen out of Talbot. Talbot's really been impressive to me. He's come up with some big saves and some big games, and I've been a fan.
For my part, first thing that comes to mind is that not right now, but there will come a time on the show where I think we're going to have a very interesting conversation about Alex Lyon. I think that he has been really good. He was the goalie they leaned on the most last season. He's their first Red Wings goalie in a long time to like be their guy the previous season and then still do well the following season. Like usually season 2 they deflate, and Lyon has not done that this year. I think I know watchers, listeners, I think they know where I'm going with this interesting conversation about Lyon, but we'll save that for later. I I agree. I think that this tandem's the best tandem the Red Wings have had since probably Jimmy Howard and Peter Mrazek when those guys were doing well together, and that was a while ago. So um, I, I think the only thing that you maybe are iffy about, again, Talbot obviously is kind of showing that he's not super durable, but you could say the same thing about Lyon. So you have a tandem of goalies that are performing really well, are giving their team a chance to win pretty much every time they put on the pads, but also they're kind of in and out of the line, they're in and out of the press box a lot because they're injured a lot. Um, can you imagine worst case scenario where they both get injured at like the worst possible time? Remember, I think it was December where both of them were injured at the same time. That's why Kosa was able to make his NHL debut. That would be crazy. Be unfortunate, actually, is what it would be. But
no, maybe Kosa's the next man up in that situation.
At this point, I think he is, because Husso hasn't really inspired confidence this year, and he's in the last year of his deal. You're kind of at a point now where turning to Husso as the next guy up in that situation is like a detriment to Kosa. I think at some point you do have to, like Evan, you said, it's time to start slow feeding Kosa NHL reps. Typically, you'd think that would start next season, but hey, if the moment calls this season, let's see it. But as things stand right now, I do not think the Red Wings need to go out and get a goalie. They've got 2 perfectly capable ones, and they've got 3 perfectly capable AHL goaltenders right now. In fact, I again would say that maybe they could trade a goalie, but not one of their top 2 right now. I think I'm with you. Maybe like a 4. There's not rock solid or anything. You'd love to have a Shesterkin or that type, but what they do have, they're delivering, and they're delivering the best results we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, and we haven't even gotten to Augustine yet. That's just so exciting. And it kills me that you brought up Peter Mrazek. I was for certain he was going to be the goaltender of the future. You remember that World Juniors performance, or oh man, I thought that was the guy.
He absolutely refused to adapt, though. That was the problem. Like, I call it ego, call it whatever you want. Like, he absolutely 100% refused to adapt his game to the NHL speed, and then he fell out of favor because the team wanted him to adapt. And
yeah, there was a lot of talk about that.
It looks like he's doing a little better in Chicago now.
Yeah, I always heard that there was an attitude issue there, because I did kind of wonder why the Red Wings would give up on him too early. But that was the guy that I thought guy was going to be the goalie for the next generation of this new or better Red Wings team. Sorry, guys, we're running out of time here, and I got to go back to work. But Red Wings have one more game before the Four Nations break, and that will be Saturday. Lightning, they'll host the Lightning at LCA, and then the Four Nations. Like, are you guys pumped for that? Like, I'm kind of pumped. I'm not as pumped as I was like with Olympic hockey, but I still find this to be a little bit exciting. But at the same time, I'm just going to sit there and watch these games and be like, oh God, please don't get hurt. Anyway, guys, before we let you go, I want to just remind you one more time where you can find us. Check us out on YouTube at the Flying Octopod. You can find us on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Threads under the same name. And don't forget to listen on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for joining us for episode 22 of the Flying Octopus Podcast, and we'll see you on the next round.
Thanks for listening to the Flying Octopus Podcast. Follow us on YouTube at the Flying Octopus channel and Twitter at Flying Octopod.